I think there are definite and frankly pretty common sense solutions. Before 1984, if a city said that on this lot you can build a home or build a duplex or whatever, all you needed to do was show building plans that complied with all the applicable building and energy conservation and other regulations, and you got a permit. Housing was legal. We have to make housing legal again. It needs to go back to, if your plans comply with the established and published standards, you get to build a house or you get to add a unit to your house. We can't just litigate every unit as a little psychodrama. The second thing is we can't continue to allow, and I'm going to be so bold as to say, real environmental priorities get hijacked into very, very racially and economically exclusionary, I want this parking space on my street for me. I want my view from my sidewalk to never be changed. I never want to hear construction noise. That is not the environment. That is, go find your castle and live in it somewhere. But it's nothing that can be or should be enforced in an urban community or a community with neighbors, which is what we mostly have here in California. So the environment has to get retooled. CEQA does have to get retooled. And that takes leadership to bring the stakeholders together and simply stop the nonsense. And there's a ton of people like me who now make our living doing the processing and the litigating. And we're very forceful about protecting the righteousness of our calling. But it's nonsense when it's applied to housing. That's the question of the strategy for getting there, and we have not done much with our political system beyond empowering moneyed special interests. And it is a democracy, and that means that if you have a strong enough group of opponents to a policy change, they're going to be able to stop it. And that gets to another issue of do no harm. We've already made life utterly miserable for almost 40% of Californians who can't reliably meet monthly expenses, even with a relatively generous public subsidy safety net. And so making it even harder for them is no mas. A couple really simple suggestions. We can no longer pretend that importing China or importing cement from China at twice to three times the cost is a zero carbon pound of cement, while making it here at a third the cost with employment and tax benefits is 100 times more carbon. So we have to get rid of the bias and fraud in our environmental metrics, especially our climate metrics. And that's a stroke of a pen. That's just somebody saying, cut it out, treat carbon from kind of cradle to grave. And if you do that, what you quickly find out is that it's the wealthiest households with the 6-burner Wolf stoves that have a far higher carbon profile, as you know, they jet to France and have a second home in Tahoe. And so there needs to be a level of equity in climate change. And that doesn't mean, subsidizing solar that can't be absorbed into the grid in the afternoons for homeowners who happen to have enough extra cash to put solar on the home that they own, or buy the cool Tesla to drive almost no distance at all, because most Tesla drivers are in coastal communities and are not super commuters. So we just have to stop wearing this notion that we're righteous because we're worried about the environment and climate change, and start worrying about the harm we're doing to people who are alive today. And I don't think we're going to go very far, very successfully with climate change if California, the purported leader, is really leading in homelessness and poverty and lagging in home ownership and attainable housing costs. We're good at protecting the environment if we have enough money and political stability to protect the environment. when things get lawless and people get desperate, forests get cleared for firewood, and that analogy applies to climate as well. So we can and should innovate and protect the environment and address climate change, but we can't do it as one of my, I guess, idols, is not too strong a word, has said, you can't make communities of color collateral damage in your war on climate. And that is what we're doing. So let's hold the mirror up and just change those environmental agency metrics into a little bit more awareness of what many are now claiming in terms of diversity and inclusiveness and equity. I really don't think it's that complicated. I do think we can't allow anyone to sue who doesn't disclose who they are. And we can't allow people to sue over and over and over again over something they don't like just because they don't like it. There were 3 residents near one housing project in the Los Angeles area who had enough independent funding to file more than 20 lawsuits against the housing at issue. And when it was finally built, it was, of course, wildly unaffordable. And that's not a surprise, because all that money got sunk into fighting lawsuits, paying lawyers, paying, frankly, non-union workers, consultants, others, bureaucrats, to process rather than make progress. Holding up a practical lens to what's really going on and who's really getting the money, and what our asserted goal is on addressing global climate change versus what our actual result is, fraudulently not counting what we consume, happily counting people who move to Texas or Arizona as greenhouse gas reductions for California. That's just nonsense, and it needs to end.